Most of the decisions you agonize over are secretly the same decision, wearing different clothes. Take the job or stay put. Say the thing or stay quiet. Leave or stay. Underneath almost all of them is the same private calculation. Which choice will I regret more? Here's what almost nobody knows about that calculation, and it says humans are systematically, predictably wrong about what they'll actually end up regretting. Not randomly wrong. Not wrong half the time in one direction and half in the other. Wrong in the same specific direction over and over in a way that quietly distorts an enormous number of the decisions you'll spend your whole life making. Start with what regret actually looks like when researchers study it directly, because it doesn't come in one shape. Psychologists Thomas Gilovich and Victoria Medvec identified two distinct varieties of regret with two distinct signatures. The first is what gets called hot regret. It's immediate, sharp, and tied to a specific action you took. You said the wrong thing, you made the trade at the wrong moment, you took the leap, and it didn't work out. This kind of regret arrives fast and it arrives loud because the action is vivid, specific, and easy to point to as the exact cause of the pain. The second is wistful regret. It's quieter, slower to arrive, and tied to something you didn't do, the relationship you never pursued, the move you never made, the conversation you kept postponing until postponing became permanent. This kind of regret doesn't announce itself the way hot regret does. It tends to surface later, sometimes much later, often without a single identifiable moment attached to it. Just a diffuse, persistent sense of a door that quietly closed somewhere without you noticing it happening. Here's the finding that changes how this should actually inform a decision. Gilovich and Medvec's research found that when people are asked immediately after a decision which they expect to regret more, the action they took or the thing they didn't do, they consistently predict the action. In the short term, that prediction tends to be accurate too. Actions that go badly generate sharp, immediate regret, precisely because hot regret is fast and specific. But when the same category of question is asked about decisions from further in the past, months or years out, rather than days, the pattern reverses, consistently and predictably. Across their research, looked at over a longer time horizon, people report regretting their inactions more than their actions, and by a wide margin. The things they didn't do, the chances they didn't take, the words they didn't say. These are what tend to surface unprompted when people are asked, later in life, what they most regret. This is the asymmetry worth sitting with directly, because it means your instinct in the moment of deciding is being generated by the wrong time horizon. Standing at the decision point, the fear of a bad action, saying the thing, and having it go badly. Taking the job and having it fail feels louder and more present than the fear of a quiet non-event that hasn't happened yet and may never announce itself as a loss at all. But the research on where regret actually accumulates over a full life says the quiet non-event is the one more likely to still be sitting there, unresolved years later. Why actions get resolved and inactions don't. The mechanism behind this asymmetry is worth understanding because it isn't just an observed pattern. It has a specific identifiable cause. And the cause runs through something psychologists call justification. An action that goes badly, once it's happened, becomes available for a specific kind of psychological work. It can be explained. It can be folded into a story that makes sense of it. I took the risk because at the time it was the right call given what I knew. Or, at least it taught me something. Or, at least I found out. Even a bad outcome, once it exists as a completed event, gives the mind material to work with, a narrative to build, a way to metabolize it and move it toward resolution. This connects to research on how people cope with negative outcomes more broadly, and it explains something specific about why hot regret, however sharp initially, tends to fade with time. It gets processed because there's something concrete to process. An inaction offers no equivalent material. There's no event to explain, no specific outcome to make sense of, nothing but an open, unresolved counterfactual that can be replayed indefinitely, in as many different imagined versions as the mind cares to generate, without ever reaching anything resembling closure. You can't fully rationalize a thing that never happened, because there's no actual result to rationalize it against. Only an endless, unfalsifiable set of imagined alternate outcomes, all equally available, none of them ever confirmed or resolved. This is why wistful regret has the specific texture it has: persistent, diffuse, resistant to the kind of narrative resolution that eventually dulls the sharper pain of a regretted action. Why the prediction fails. From psychologists Timothy Wilson and Daniel Gilbert on what they term affective forecasting, the process by which people predict their own future emotional states. Their research, conducted across many different kinds of predicted events, found a consistent pattern called the impact bias, a tendency to overestimate both the intensity and the duration of future emotional reactions, especially negative ones. Applied to the decision point itself, this explains why the fear of a bad action looms so large in the moment of deciding. You're forecasting the immediate aftermath of a bad outcome, the sharp, hot version of regret. And that forecast, while roughly accurate about the initial intensity, badly overestimates how long that intensity will actually last. Wilson and Gilbert's research consistently found people underestimating their own capacity to explain away, adapt to, and move past negative events. Precisely because the justification process described above does real, effective work faster and more completely than people predict it will. Meanwhile, the quieter cost of an inaction, the one that doesn't generate a sharp forecast at all because nothing dramatic seems to be happening in the moment of choosing not to act, goes almost entirely unweighted in the prediction, not because it's actually smaller, but because it doesn't have a vivid, hot moment to attach itself to at the time the forecast is being made. General decisions. It would be inaccurate to claim every action is safe to take, or every inaction is a future regret waiting to surface. Some actions produce lasting, justified regret. Some inactions were the correct call and never resurface as loss at all. The finding is a statistical pattern about where regret tends to accumulate in aggregate across large groups of people looking back over years, not a rule that overrides judgment about the specific situation in front of you. What the research does offer, used correctly, is a correction to a specific, identifiable bias in how the decision gets weighted in the moment. If a decision feels close, genuinely close, not obviously reckless in one direction, the instinct in the room will systematically overweight the vivid hot cost of the action and underweight the quiet, compounding cost of the inaction, simply because one of those costs is loud enough to forecast accurately and the other isn't, building the actual question. So the practical recalibration isn't which choice feels safer right now, because safer in the moment of deciding is almost always answered by whichever option avoids the loud, forecastable, hot regret, regardless of what the research says about where regret actually tends to land over time. The more accurate question, built directly from this research, is something closer to this. If I choose the quieter, safer feeling option, is there a wistful version of this decision I can already picture myself living inside in 5 years? A version with no clean edges, no specific bad moment to point to and explain away, just a persistent, low-grade sense of a door that closed somewhere without ceremony. If that wistful version is easy to picture, vivid even now, before anything has happened, that's worth taking seriously, as data, not as intrusive anxiety to be dismissed. It's very possibly a more accurate forecast of where this specific decision will actually land in the long run than the louder, more immediate fear of the action going badly, which the research suggests you're probably overweighting anyway. So the next time a decision comes down to a straightforward feeling calculation of which option you'll regret more, it's worth remembering that your instinct is answering a question about next week, using data that was never designed to forecast where you'll actually be standing in 10 years. The action you're afraid of has an expiration date built into it because it will eventually become a story you can tell yourself one way or another. The inaction you're not afraid of yet doesn't come with that expiration date, and that absence, not the size of the risk itself, is the actual reason it tends to be the one still waiting for you, unresolved, long after the fear that talked you out of it has been completely forgotten